and welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report powered by CaliberMind. Our goal on the RMR is to help marketers move from subject matter experts to strategic business partners. I'm your host, Camela Thompson, and today I'm thrilled to introduce Jeff Q.
So my name is Jeff Q. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Just as an intro, my background is marketing ops. My current role, I'm in a director role at a international software company called Magnitude Software. And Magnitude is a good sized company, really growing. We service the enterprise market, specifically Oracle, SAP customers. We sell tools that make the SAP and Oracle experience so much better.
When we were speaking, we were talking about the importance of team building. And we really came at it initially from the perspective of what are you looking for in future employees? How do you want them to operate? Is it independently? But I'd love to talk about maybe, and I'm throwing you a little bit of a curveball, but maybe about the strategy when your team's beginning to grow. Who do you hire first? How do you make those kinds of decisions?
So it's a great question and very relevant to my experience. When I was hired by Magnitude, there was no marketing operations team. There was a single marketing automation individual who was being pulled, like horses ripping a person apart. They were getting grabbed from everywhere. Everybody wanted a piece of them. And, in this marketing ops, marketing automation, it is very service oriented. You want to say yes, you want to be helpful. And when you're nice and a nice person, it becomes really tough, right?
Boundaries are hard. Boundaries are really hard.
And because you have so many stakeholders, like when you're a single person, other people don't really care about what the other person wants. It's not them being selfish or anything. It's just that they do have a singular vision and it's necessary for them to be successful. So the company realized this was a challenge. They needed to build out a team. They went looking for someone who had team building experience. I was fortunate to be hired for the role and start a team already with one person already on board. And then my first hire after that was someone who actually had minimal Marketo experience, but tons of Salesforce Marketing Cloud experience.
Oh, wonderful.
And during which is, a far tougher product to master than Marketo. But what I was looking for wasn't someone who could kind of talk through flows. What I was really looking for during the interview, and this was pre-COVID a couple of years ago, in person, and I brought in the sales ops director with me to interview this individual. And at one point I said, if you need to get up and draw it out on the board, that's fine. Because the questions we were asking needed to be answered visually, needed to be answered in a flow chart style. We needed to see visual if then else decisions being made. Yes. We needed a decision tree being shown. It was the only way to do it. You can't speak to these multiple streams of thought, which is what you get in a workflow. Mm-hmm. And I was just waiting for them to pick it up. They did. And later, and started drawing out the solution I was looking for. And after the interview, even the director of sales operations said to me, I was really hoping they would pick up that highlighter, right? And go to the whiteboard. And they did. And the person was still around. He's still with us. He's great. Hope I never lose him. It's tough because the market's competitive out there and there's a big demand for people with his experience. So if you're in if you're in marketing ops, there's salaries are up. People who actually if you already have, you have people on your team and they're doing a good job and they're knowledgeable, pay attention to them. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Look at the market. You don't want to lose them. The cost, because if you lose them and you have to hire somebody new, you're going to pay market rates. So why not just pay the market rate to the person who already knows your systems, has a good working relationship within your business. So,
well, and typically during the seeking a candidate process, you're spending about half the salary you would have spent on the previous person just trying to find that new individual. And I think with marketing operations, it could be even more because I've seen positions sit open 6 to 9 months. I think part of that is the business doesn't know how to define the role in a reasonable way. I think on a lot of marketing operation groups I'm in, we post job roles and then comment on.
Yep, I'm in there.
Yeah.
It was an interesting comment I saw on LinkedIn from a large platform. I don't want to say which one, but it was essentially like a VP level person saying they had gotten so many qualified applications for this role they posted, a director role. It's going to be one of the hardest roles to fill because there's so many qualified people out there. And what I think that speaks to is that the people out who are currently in roles are looking for new opportunities. They're recognizing, that there is a promotion in there, a salary increase. And this VP basically said, hey, same thing I said earlier was you need to pay attention to the staff you have, right? If you have, this actually goes back to the question you asked me a few minutes ago, what do I look for in building a team, right? And it's less about the actual platform skills. Mm-hmm. I had told our internal recruiter, I said, I'm fine with hiring someone who has a few months of experience using MailChimp, because if they actually have strong logic skills, they'll figure this out really quickly. Mm-hmm. You have all these platforms coming out. Workato is one, Syncari is another one, which is really awesome. So I'm going to throw a little plug out for Syncari, right? Because I really like what they're doing, and I hope that's okay.
No, actually, you're fine.
Well, of course, Caliber Mind, right? So
no, you're okay. You're okay.
But there's a lot here. The thing is all these platforms are really good. Certain ones are going to meet your business requirement. Not every single one is going to meet your business requirement. I started off using Zapier to integrate Marketo data into a Google Sheet, and then using Supermetrics to pull in all that paid media data as well into those Google Sheets and build a flat file.
Loved me some Supermetrics. They were really good at the time.
Yeah. I don't know what they're doing now. There's just so many cool platforms out there, so much cool technology. And, they don't need a lot of customers. They need 10,000 customers, or if they're enterprise, 600 customers, right, to be profitable companies. They don't have to solve everybody's problem. And as well, the user has to like the interfaces. The interface is difficult. No one's going to use it.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest hurdle with some of the older marketing automation platforms in particular. Without the visual flows, Marketo is kind of one of them, where you have your paths, and it's just not as.
So Marketo is fugly.
Thank you. I wasn't going to say it because I actually really like what it can do, and I think its integration with Salesforce is the best I've seen. Yeah.
But of course, Marketo has timing issues within that Salesforce integration. However, their new executable flows, executable campaigns, are a huge thing. This is where it comes back to that question you asked me of building a team, is people who can build out logic skills. And all these platforms, like I said, with Workato, you can do no code workflows, but you can also make them very demanding on the platform. If you don't know how to use logic skills and think about reducing the workload on the system, it's going to take forever for your processes to run. So you may say, okay, go find, if this, then that, right? If this value exists, then I want you to do this to those records. But what's going to happen is the platform is going to run through the whole database and look for that if statement. Mm-hmm. But if you know that you only want to look at people in two campaigns, you would just ideally say in member of these two campaigns. Then ask the if statement, right? And then that runs through in about a second and a half compared to 3 minutes.
And those seconds add up. Like you have a bunch of logic steps that people typically walk through. So if you're supplementing country data, or you're running through an enrichment process and you're having to standardize the values to get things to move over properly, it can blow up really quickly. That's a great point.
Yes.
I know when I was hiring, I looked a lot for somebody with an analytics background, because if I could see that they understood pattern matching and they understood Excel logic really strongly and knew like the order of operations there, they were pretty teachable when it comes to system stuff. It's exactly as you said, it's that logic piece. But I found that a lot of times I was having to come up with almost tests on the fly, where I would show charts or tables and ask for a pattern, and try not to let people get too hung up in figuring out the meaning of the numbers, and just really tell me, like, where are the outliers? That's all I'm really looking for. So it was interesting.
So you nailed it with the expression order of operations. And in a number of spreadsheets, I'll often put a tab calling order of operations so I can explain to people what I'm looking at. So with routing, when we built out our lead routing in Marketo, before people would just send me these random instructions of, okay, this person's left, let's do this, send it to this person. And I would get on a call with them and I would help populate this spreadsheet that we had built where we followed an order of operations. And I would go through the order of operations with them to say, all right, when we assign the lead, right, we're going to look at two things. We're going to look at where is the billing country for the business and where is the location of the individual, because privacy is related to the location of the individual.
Precisely.
Right. And account routing is based on the location of the business itself.
And every business has different rules.
Yes.
My goodness. So yeah, absolutely critical to have that documented really well.
Right. And when you start to segment out, territory in the United States, are you looking at, west to central to east? If you break it out across time, if you break your territory across time zone, or if you break it across, north and southern hemispheres. And so you need to start looking at, well, if the state is this, right? So you have to look at the state of what U.S. state or Canadian province the business headquarters are in, and you pull that from Zoom Info based on the company name that they've entered or the domain of their email address they've entered, and then there's them identifying what country they exist in for consent, and then you just route from there, and you set permissions and consent options from there. So again, it comes down to, does somebody have those logic skills? If they have the logic skills, finding someone who's older, who knows who learned Pascal as a programming language where those logic skills are really important, because makes or breaks how fast your programs are going to run. Those are the best people to get. So
yeah, and I really love your point about, and we've made this point on the podcast over and over, skills are transferable between systems. So if you're using something like MailChimp and setting up automation in there, I'm still interested in you. Yes. And then Salesforce, understanding how the two systems talk to each other, order of operations, is such a big win and a prospect. So when people ask me, when I'm mentoring them, what skill sets they should really focus on to make themselves more marketable, the two I always say are Trailhead's wonderful, learn more about Salesforce, and SQL. Because I think that's not going away. Our need to really understand, like you said, the logic and understanding how to mine data, because we're just in a complex world with so much information thrown at us all the time. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Of course, nobody can see our faces because it's an audio recording, but as you saw, I was just nodding as you spoke, total agreement. SQL, it's easy to find the history of SQL. Was created in the 70s. The U.S. government, forced the big, I can't remember which the companies were, but I think SAP was one of them. Oracle was one of them, a couple others. And they basically all had to get together if they wanted to do business with the U.S. government and come up with a common database language. And they came up with SQL. And it hasn't changed. There's much like HTML. There's new flavors, new terminology kind of thing. But, a join is a join, right?
Yep.
And the thing to understand, sort of a key indicator of someone who understands marketing automation platforms and CRMs, is when they say, what is it? If you ask them, what is it? What are you looking at? What are you doing? And they say, well, this is just a pretty interface on top of a SQL database. Perfect. Right? Then you know they know.
Yeah.
Because in Marketo, in Pardot, in all these programs, when you use a filter to create a segment, and then you have the flow steps, it all looks very nice and easy to read. It's very high level business function, very low code. But in the back end, when you open a support ticket because something went wrong, they can actually see the SQL code that was commands that were firing.
Yeah, and I think they call it SOQL, is a slightly different flavor, but it's readable for sure in Salesforce specifically. Yeah, no, anytime they say it's basically a data warehouse, I'm like, yes, I want to work with this person because you understand
tables.
Right. Well, it's critical to understand how reporting works if you configure anything. I don't care if it's a workflow or a user interface, you have to understand how to mine for the information everybody needs. And that informs how you encourage input.
Yeah. And where it's going to pay off too is when you start to run lists. In Pardot, they're called dynamic lists. In Marketo, they're called smart lists.
Yep.
Right. In Marketo, we call them smart campaigns. I think in Pardot, they're workflows, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
There was a, I think your previous guest had done that document that.
Ellie Wittich, Anna Leary, and Ben, the lexicon. Yes.
Yeah, the lexicon. So I downloaded that and I was like, oh, this is excellent. Right. And I saw it's been posted on the MoPros Slack group as well, which is great. It really helps when it comes to troubleshooting. Just having these logic skills for troubleshooting to be able to fix these things. It's like, well, you look at the numbers and you go, that number is way too low. I should have 3 times this many records showing up, when I look at the people tab or persons tab. So, and
this is awful terminology to use, but one of my bosses referred to it as passing the sniff test. So he would just say, like, is it within? People need to realize that whoever they're supporting is going to be referencing data somewhere. And you need to make sure that whatever you're reporting is within range. Like, do that double check, do that extra few minutes of digging in. And then you can also tell the difference between people who have done troubleshooting from people who haven't had the opportunity to do it yet, because they know to ask for specific examples. Like, can you show me a record? And then I can dig into it a little bit better. It's just like an instant, you've done this before.
It's like when you open a ticket with Marketo support these days and you say, hey, I'm getting an error here, but I don't know where it's coming from. And they send you back a response saying, can you tell us which lead is giving you the error?
I would love to.
I would love to.
This is a topic I bring up a lot because I see symptoms of it everywhere, especially now we've been in year 2 of a pandemic. Everyone's just tired and burnout is cropping up. I mean, it was already a huge issue before the pandemic hit, and I feel like the pandemic's just amplifying everything we're feeling. So you have a team. We, as marketing ops people, tend to be people pleasers and not super good with the boundaries. So how do you coach your team to help them avoid hitting that burnout point? Have you been burned by attribution? Are you tired of fighting with salespeople over target accounts and lead scores? We've all been there, and that's because traditional marketing analytics tools bolt onto your CRM and calculate attribution and engagement scores on the data as it is. And let's face it, most of the time, your CRM data is far from perfect. Caliber Mind is unique because it pulls data from all your sources, not just your CRM, into a data platform. Caliber Mind unifies your information, which means you can attribute dollars to website activity, standard Salesforce campaign activity, and more, without wasting time in spreadsheets. Ditch the spreadsheets and check out a new way to analyze revenue data with Caliber Mind at calibermind.com.
Have empathy. Key number 1, rule number 1. Like I myself like to believe I lead with servant leadership. I always ask for feedback. I make it very clear to the people on the team that I manage. And even though I'm in a director role, the way I see myself is I'm the one who, something goes wrong, I take the heat. But if something goes great, I make sure to really socialize and share the team member who had created that success. I don't say, yeah, my team, I did it. It's no, so-and-so did it. So-and-so did it. And I'll even call out other people on other teams in a group setting and say, I'm presenting this dashboard. I couldn't have done it without the help from so-and-so, right? Their support was really critical in getting this done. So thank you. I think credit where credit is due. You do it publicly. And then if you have to correct somebody, you do that privately.
And I don't think that detracts at all from the perception of the manager if they're giving people on their team credit. I think as long as they're accomplishing what they need to accomplish, everybody's happy with the outcome. Give your team credit. I think people also notice the opposite when a leader isn't taking credit for or isn't giving credit where credit's due, I think the team members probably notice it first. But I know other leadership teams, it's not something anybody likes.
Yeah, you don't want to be bossed from behind. You don't want to be bossed from behind.
Yeah.
You want to be led from in front of you, right? Mm-hmm. You want to work in a safe environment. And by that, I mean mentally, emotionally safe. We're all working from home. Of course, physically we're safe. Our job, our biggest risk is hurting our finger on our mouse. Our biggest risk, right?
Tripping on the way back from getting coffee. Not that I've done that.
No, never done it. I started with saying empathy and working with stakeholders, right? But I've also let people on my team know that, look, if you're talking to a stakeholder and they really want something done and you can't manage it, like if they're panicking and upset, you do whatever you can to solve their problem because they're emotionally connected to this. Mm-hmm. You need to own it and not let them down. But and people will make mistakes. They'll forget about stuff. You don't want them to get in trouble. If you can help them avoid getting in trouble because they forgot something, have that empathy. But if they simply want to get something done on a Friday because they just want it done and know it's checked off, and really they should have let you know 3 days ago, you need to push back and say, I can't do that for you. And I have all this stuff in front of you. But if it is critical, let's contact the other stakeholder together and see if they don't mind if we bump their work. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So now stakeholder one is aware that they're going to impact stakeholder two. Right. And if they agree to it from the view of what is the business need, what's important for the business, not what's important for John and Susan, and these aren't real names. It's what is the business requirement? What is that need to be done? Or what is it that needs to be done?
And I think leaders model a couple of key behaviors that speak to that. One is they model how they want people on their team to handle mistakes. So if they make a mistake, they publicly, I made this mistake, here's what I'm going to do to correct. That actually builds a lot of credibility for your team, and it makes them feel safe to admit that they've made a mistake.
Yeah, that's huge. And they need to feel safe that they can can do that. And so actually had that happen on my team where I wasn't aware of a mistake, but a team member had missed something, discovered it with a stakeholder. Mm-hmm. I know the stakeholder kind of let them know their displeasure about it or disappointment with it, right? Mm-hmm. They were let down. My team member let me know, but had a solution in place, right? Like I always think if you're going to bring up a problem, you only bring it up when you can recommend a solution.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like if you're just saying, well, we have this problem, what are we going to do about it? Well, you're throwing it on somebody else. And I think it's fair to say we've identified this problem. We need help to develop a solution. So now you're asking for help. Or it's, we think the solution is this. Can we get some feedback? Mm-hmm. Right? So it's always, you're part of a team. You're not a lone wolf. You don't solve the problem by yourself. You keep everybody informed. You maintain good communication. Going back to that empathy part as well, I make sure that my team members know that when they are faced with a situation where they have to say no, they can always just defer to me. And it usually is, I want to help you. Let me go check with Jeff. Mm-hmm. Right. And I've never had to be a bad guy. I got to say that, right? Everything's that really never happens.
The market's really hot right now. People are seeing they can move to a higher paying position. But I think another key thing here is that people are realizing the geographic boundaries that they used to have to put on their job search are no longer necessarily an issue. A lot of companies are very open to hiring the right talent remotely. I think as a hiring manager, that produces some interesting challenges, but why don't we talk a little bit more about advocating for our team and watching the market?
Sure. Yeah. So I think geography is important, but time zones can be all over the place. I have direct reports in India. I have dotted line connections to Europe. Mm-hmm. At SAP, certainly it was on meetings with people all over in Malaysia, in Germany, France, Hong Kong. And colleagues that I used to work with at SAP or still at SAP have themselves, great opportunities there. They've moved to New York City, they've moved to Germany on their career paths, but you're still talking to people here in the West Coast of North America. Some companies, I think some younger companies may struggle with the time zone differences. But if you hire people who have experience working across time zones, who can be trusted to work independently, then you don't need to be monitoring them through the day, right?
Yeah. And I'm hoping that's something we've learned through COVID, because I remember people using the line, I can't let you work from home because not everyone does a good job. And until everybody can figure it out, we can't let people work from home. And the thought was always, why aren't we managing the person's performance and behavior instead of having a little more flexibility?
Yeah.
It's just really interesting to me.
I remember having a manager at one place who wanted people to work from the office when you're like, I think I'm going to work from home tomorrow. And they're like, well, why? You're going to be in town, right?
Yep.
You got anything going on? Nope. Okay, well, I'll see you in the office tomorrow.
Yep.
But then they themselves, because it was an open office environment, they would go find a meeting room and hide in there all day. And so you wouldn't see them all day.
So they could get things done.
Correct. Right. And of course we're messaging through, or this is early Slack days kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Where I am, the company's great in that they've reduced office space. They're not going to be a completely remote company. They do want to have some retail physical spaces available, in Vancouver, down in Austin, so forth, right? But the spaces are smaller because, they've realized people are functioning just great. Had a good year, right? Everyone's working from home. Some people do want to go back to an office, like on my team.
One of the things I worry about remote work for operations people in particular is networking is such a crucial component of building your career and connections with people. I just hope that people take as many opportunities as they can to connect with their coworkers and not when they need something. So it's just my one thing that kind of pops in my head. I'm like, so many of us are so introverted already.
What makes us good at our job at operations is,
Sure.
we do like to be more on our own kind of thing.
Yeah.
I like what Mike Rizzo has done with the MOPs and Edward Unthank at Echimos. They've both built out really good Slack groups and built out their communities, and I'm on both of them. And there is a lot of good conversation that goes on. Some of it's fun. Like there's, the MOPs venting channel on the Echimos one, right?
Yes, that's good gifts. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of fun there. And then, you end up talking to people I've started chatting with people from Percuto, for example, which is in Montreal. Yeah. And I've met Alex, who owns Percuto, a number of times, but now I'm meeting with the some of the, like Justin, who's one of the architects there.
Oh, he's brilliant. Yeah. Very kind.
Really nice. Yeah. Really nice guy. And you know what? Everyone is really helpful. Yeah. People, sometimes you see questions and you think, well, that's pretty basic. You should really read the documentation, but you can help people by saying, here's the link to these pages in the Adobe Experience League documentation. Yep. This will really help you answer your question.
Or here's a video if that doesn't work for you.
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't. It's funny. I have dogs, so I think of it in terms of resource guarding. We'll have the bone and growl. I don't see that as much in operations, and I'm grateful that our community is so open with their knowledge.
Well, I just think there's not enough of us.
Yes.
Right.
We're welcome. We're a very welcoming crew.
Something you and I talked about earlier is that expression of the grass is always greener.
Yes.
Right. And I saw this. I think I saw someone posting it in a Slack group or Reddit. But basically, it's like, be careful. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. Yeah. But sometimes it is. And the reason is because it gets watered over there.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's what we're seeing within this great resignation that we're seeing across North America amongst the tech community kind of thing. And it's not even the tech community. I think you're seeing people who work in the service industry also leaving jobs as well, and going to finding something different. They're finding those office jobs. And
in the US, it's ER doctors, nurses. They're just leaving in droves.
Yep.
Speaking of people new to the game and us being so welcoming, what's your advice for people who are thinking about coming into marketing operations?
One thing I noticed is something I saw at SAP is in internship programs. I'm going to say right now, I am not an advocate of unpaid internships.
Yes.
Maybe it's a little different if you're getting an opportunity to go, spend 3 months hanging out with Jay-Z or something like that at his music. He's got a music production company.
Oh, what's rolling through my head is like, is your housing paid? Does he pay for your food?
Right.
Like it's sure.
Yeah, but Jay-Z's got money, so why do you have unpaid interns kind of thing? Yeah. And the reason I can speak from it is, one of my sons, I have a couple boys, and one just took auto body repair. So my son is doing his apprenticeship, but it's a paid apprenticeship.
Yeah. Right.
And that's the whole point. And it's a Red Seal program. And he was fortunate to find good mentors and end up at a good place. He's learning how to work with some very cool systems and equipment and vehicles and like brands, but it's paid, right? So going back to the internship programs, SFU here in Vancouver, Simon Fraser University, has a very good partnership with SAP for interns. And the intern programs pay well at SAP in Canada. I know that Salesforce also does something similar down in San Francisco, and Salesforce pays a lot more as well, but it's San Francisco. How that's being done under a COVID environment, I have no idea. Right? I'm not sure what's happening there, but that's something to think about. Is if you are aware of where you want to end up in the technology industry, finding out what companies you want to work for and what internship programs are in place, then look at those universities and do what you can to end up in one of those internship programs, because the people I've seen go through the internship programs have either ended up hired full-time as FTEs, full-time equivalents at SAP, gone to Salesforce or gone to some other startups and do very well for themselves. So that is something that's really important to pay attention to.
And something you mentioned through your son's program was finding excellent mentors. I think that's another approach. There's so many online communities, and those of us in marketing ops are really vocal about promoting each other's skills. If you find somebody who resonates with you, maybe you get the opportunity to work with them. A lot of people are hiring right now, so that might be another approach too.
I think that's a really key point is, just looking at people as well, like looking at their online profiles. Are they helpful within online communities? What's the vibe you get from them kind of thing? Do you see them, giving feedback if I post a question and someone gives me an answer and I don't respond with a little thumbs up emoticon or something like that, I just ignore it. And essentially I'm becoming a leecher or something like that. If you think about online people who they just go there and they just
try to stir stuff up.
Well, no, that's a troll, right? But if you could just go in and you leech information, but you never share. And most online communities are like that. 10% of the members will just share and be helpful, and the other 90% are just quiet. Yeah. They don't really have a lot of activity. But finding those people, just paying attention to them, reaching out to them, but also being mindful of and respectful of time and kind of thing. But I always, when someone helps me, I always make a case to say thank you or pay it forward. Yeah.
Reciprocate in some way.
Yes. Yeah,
critical. Well, thank you so much for being on, Jeff. I really enjoyed our conversation. Where can people find you online to network? I know you mentioned a couple of the marketing ops communities, but are you on LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn, Jeff Q, so JEFFKEW, and of course the MOPros and the HMOS MOP Pro group. These communities are they really make the world a lot smaller.
Wonderful. And for those of you looking for more great content like this, check out calibermind.com.